Hello, I am Tracker TD, and well, it's that time of year again, the end of the year. 2015 is almost, or at the time of the video uploading, is behind us, and everyone is picking the games of the year. And I'm like, hey, why don't I do that, because, you know, everybody else does it, so why not? Yes, this is my Game of the Year video, but it's not going to be a conventional one. I haven't played what is on most people's lists, so the likes of Fallout 4 and Metal Gear Solid 5, they aren't here. I have had a somewhat restricted palette of games to play this year in terms of new releases, and this list is going to reflect that, so expect some surprises and hidden gems. Without further ado, let's jump straight in with number 3. Number 3 is the biggest surprise on this list, even for me. Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax was a game that was far from on my radar in the run-up to its surprise Western release. The only characters I recognised were the Sega bosses Akira and Selvaria, and Sword Art Online's representatives due to everyone telling me how utterly shit that anime is. I ended up winning the game in a fan art contest held by Sega Europe, and somehow a game I did not give two fucks about is now on my Game of the Year list. Blimey. Dengeki Bunko is a 2D, sprite-based fighter that takes characters from various Dengeki Bunko series, Dengeki being a Japanese light novel imprint. And then they just have all these characters beat the hell out of each other. Again, I didn't know any of the characters when I first played this game, but now, well, look at my current avatar of Tiger from Toradora across various social media outlets, and I think you know how all that's gone. Fighting Climax managed to get me hooked with its simple to use but difficult to master mechanics, varied roster of characters and playstyles, beautiful sprite work, and absolutely killer soundtrack. This game's also got a wafer-thin story mode, basically some monsters consuming Dengeki worlds and you've got to team up with Dreamcast from the Sega Hard Girl series to save them. But it's not exactly a huge blemish, and it still provides some kind of entertaining backdrop to the crazy stuff that's going on. The alternate story mode Dream Duel is also interesting with the funny conversations between the characters. Seeing Tiger and Shizuo from Durarara bickering at each other will never get old. Speaking of that soundtrack, each piece complements its arena perfectly. The stages in Dengeki Bunko are all based on Sega games, and whilst not remixes, the song choices are all strikingly influenced from the source material. And yes, this does mean you can have an anime throwdown in Green Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog. And that's awesome. The game actually has tons of Sega fanservice, and even a bit of Hatsune Miku fanservice, especially in the alternate colour palettes, which I did an entire video on with the help of some friends. I actually would have liked to see some stages based on the properties represented, to be honest. Battling in Ikebukuro, as seen in Durarara, would be awesome. Still, on the whole, Dengeki Bunko is definitely the surprise choice on this list, and a bit of a hidden gem in Sega's output. Even better, barely a few weeks ago at the time of recording this, a new update available on PS3, PS Vita and now PS4 has been released, Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax Ignition. I was going to import the Vita version, but since my plans to get a Vita have gone AWOL once again, I might consider the PS3 version. Either way, adds new characters, new stages, and a slew of extra mechanics and options. If you can, grab that version. It's even being supported with new DLC characters, even if the last thing we needed was for them to add a third Sword Art Online rep in a game with only one rep per franchise in most cases. Either way, Dengeki Bunko is at number 3 on this list. Number 2 on this list is far more conventional and what people would expect from a Game of the Year list. Splatoon. Admittedly, I've not played a huge amount of Splatoon, only 44 hours, but I would be doing the game a huge disservice by missing it off this list. The game started out kind of weak, barely any stages or weapons, and with an entertaining but short campaign. It was Nintendo's addition of content through drip-fed updates that kept the appeal up, and as more options became available, the game evolved into something pretty incredible. The addition of friend lobbies in particular gave the game a massive boost over its launch state. I sat down for a 30-minute session, for example, and that became a 6-hour session. Oops. Again, I don't honestly play Splatoon regularly, but it's interesting to see where Nintendo's going to take the IP. Because they will take it places, given how the game is shifting Wii U's all over the place in Japan. Speaking of the IP itself, it's got an incredibly appealing style. The Inklings are well designed, the gear on offer is stylish and fun, the thing screams 90s. There was a reason I made those insane Splatoon X Sega mockups, and that's because this game feels like what would happen if Nintendo released a late 90s Sega game. There's obvious comparisons to be drawn to Jet Set Radio here, and given that's one of my favourite games of all time, I was almost guaranteed to love Splatoon. Speaking of which, the general concept of the gameplay also strikes as hugely original in a market oversaturated by shooters. Splatoon barely feels like a shooter as we know it today, and honestly it's like a classic run and gun moved into 3D, with a competitive aspect of course. Planning strategies across a varied stage lineup is a huge factor in Splatoon, and of course adapting strategies to your loadout. I actively sought to vary my weapon usage beyond my beloved Aero Spray once I hit level 20, and in doing so, while I wasn't as perhaps overpowered, I was having a lot of fun going all Metal Gear Rising on squids with a paintbrush. And once again, the soundtrack, absolutely glorious. Splatoon proves Nintendo can take risks with IP and still come out with success, and I'm interested to see where the Inklings go next. Even if it's not into the Super Smash Bros. Battlefield. And so, at number 1. Okay, look, if you know me well, and if you've been reading my Twitter feed where I've mentioned this is my game of the year on multiple occasions, you probably saw number 1 coming. But Hatsune Miku Project Mirai DX isn't just here because I'm a huge Miku fanatic. Take Project Diva F Second for example. If that was this year's Miku release, I'll be honest, it probably wouldn't have been my game of the year. I've barely played Diva F Second, and that's the fault of the fact I lack a PlayStation Vita. I cannot do rhythm games, period, to be honest. But especially not on a console where TV lag is my mortal enemy that I can never seem to iron out. Project Mirai was a miracle. A Miku rhythm game on a portable system that I do own, and isn't dead like the PSP, and one targeted towards a beginning audience. Hooray! Now I can feel less utterly shite at rhythm games. It's true that Mirai DX is far easier than the Diva series, but in my opinion it's also far more appealing. I'm not usually a fan of the chibi aesthetic, but here it works due to being based on the extremely well designed Nendoroid figure series from Good Smile Company. There's a huge emphasis on content here too. In Diva you have the rhythm game and the Diva Room as your main interactivity, and the Diva Room sucks. In Mirai, the Diva Room is basically here, but it's far more fleshed out with ways to directly interact with your partner, that being Miku, Luca, Rin, Len, Maiko or Kaito. You can change them all on the fly. It's like raising a ton of virtual pets, and surprisingly in depth. Maxing out affection takes a hell of a long time, but I did my duty and maxed Miku's at least, and there's a payoff for that. Enough of that. The game itself, the rhythm game, it comes with a touchscreen based mode where you tap along to the rhythm, and a button based mode, more in line with the Diva series. I stick to button mode, but the touch mode works surprisingly well too. You can definitely have plenty of fun no matter your preference. You're not going to be tested in Mirai DX, to be blunt. If you get a game over on normal, you're a serious novice. Hard mode, I can understand it for a few songs though, and don't even get me started on super hard mode, Jesus. Anyway, the rhythm game works incredibly well and isn't as scattered as Diva, which I enjoy. Keeping rhythm is more emphasised over managing to follow the notes on screen, and I can appreciate that. In addition, there's plenty of ways to customise the experience with costumes and stuff. You can even change the button colours on screen to the PlayStation button colours in order to help out that Project Diva muscle memory. I'd be here forever if I went into everything Mirai has to offer, but it's by far my most played game released this year, clocking in 90 hours up to maxing Miku's affection to get the most terrifying unlock of all time, Miku Deo. And in a game built around the soundtrack, Mirai delivers with only 1 or 2 tracks that I don't really ever go back to. I shouldn't be surprised that the game's so good, what with it being delivered by the glorious Sega AM2, hence the amount of Sega arcade references in it, but hey, that's how it is. And look Sega, you don't need Sonic to make it onto my Game of the Year list. How about you announce a Diva X localization, yeah? And so yeah, that's my 2015 Game of the Year list. Like I said, it's very unconventional, but I really do recommend checking these games out. Again, I wasn't picking Dengeki Bunko up at all originally, but it's now on my Game of the Year list. These are really surprising games in most cases, stuff like a new Nintendo IP and stuff, and you should definitely try them out if you haven't. Thanks for watching, and have a great night.